This is our progress so far. We have basically the entire carcass built, and the base moldings are on. All of the holes are drilled for the shelving, and we have all of our kind of support stiles in the back. I haven't plugged or put the screw plugs in any of the holes yet, primarily because you just want to make sure everything fits before you glue these in, and make sure everything is square and level and plumb and everything else. So this is how the front looks. The front bottom molding has a little bit of a support in the middle. The whole piece is just 2 inches shy of 6 feet, so this is 70 inches, and I wanted to give it some center support in the middle, and I'll put a block in the back too. That'll kind of be hidden, but I want support in the middle so it doesn't sag at all in there. So I guess what's next here is we're going to look at making the doors and the top, and then we'll do some of the molding work too, because for the base molding here, after these holes are plugged, this will have a 1/2 inch quarter round on here. And this will be mitered here in the corner, and that's how that will look. So I'll ease this edge over just a little bit with maybe like a, not even an eighth, maybe 3/16, 3/32, I guess. Just a real small round over here, so that this comes up and then this comes up on here, and that will give it a nice kind of a molded look. And then the doors will sit down about 3/8 of an inch here. This will also be repeated on the top, underneath the top board too. So we'll do some of that detail work, but we'll make the doors first and the top, and see how all that fits together. I have to say, one of my favorite things about building with pine is just how light it is, and you can move it around quite a bit. I've built with oak and maple, mahogany, walnut, and those just get really heavy to lug around and move around, especially if you ever move. I'm going to take probably a good hour or so and take a look at all of my edges here, and I'm going to round these over, and that takes a little bit of time. I round all the end grains, and underneath here I'll round these over just a little bit with a spoke shave. But this is a pretty simple process where I'll just go with maybe a 1/8 of an inch at a 45 degree, and then to round that over, another 23, and just round it over a little bit. On the end grain, we'll come down this way, round that over this way, that way, and then we'll hit all this with just a little bit of sandpaper so it's not quite so smooth, so that the paint sticks to it. So I'll spend some time doing that to all these edges before I make the doors and the top. Looking at the inside corners, this is one of the side pieces. What I like to do is, while the molding here, I think on the front is pretty stable, we're really only holding it together with a couple of screws. So against the bottom of the side pieces, I like to cut these little blocks, and these will fit right up in here, and they will be perfectly flush with the bottom, and then I just kind of chamfer over the edges to soften them a little bit. But these will be glued in here, and then these will take the weight of the side pieces, and I have one for the bottom here as well, and they'll all take the weight and transfer it down to the ground. I also made one for the centerpiece, and that looks like this. It's a pretty large piece of wood here, and I've chamfered the edges too. And this will just go on the bottom here in the back, and then I'll put a couple of screws up into the bottom back rail at a 45-degree angle. And I'll put a little bit of glue on here too to hold that on, and that will support the back the way the front piece is supported as well, so that it won't sag. To plug your screw holes, I will cut my own screw plugs. You can buy these, but I prefer to cut them with a screw plug cutter like this. It puts a slight taper on the plug so it fits snugly in there. I do still put a little bit of glue on it. I like to cut my own so you can use the exact same wood that you built your project out of. So I'll just put some glue on a piece of scrap paper, roll the plug along it like this, line up the grain, and push it in there. You can tap it a little bit if you want. And then we'll just wipe the excess glue off. And we'll let these dry for a couple hours. Sometimes I'll let them dry overnight. And then I'll show you in a little bit later video here, or a little bit later on, how to make those nice and flush with a saw and then with a chisel. So I'll go around and do all the rest of these on the whole cabinet right now. To put these corner blocks in, I'm going to put just a little bit of glue on the two sides that touch the base molding, the bottom molding. I don't want to glue these to the face frame here, just in case I ever want to take this apart. So there's glue here and here. Yeah, glue here and here. I even have that marked with the letter A and I couldn't find where it was. So I'll just set these on here, and then I'll just put a little clamp on here. And that'll be good. We'll let those dry. And I have another one for back here. So we'll put all these on, and then the bottom, the feet and the extra braces will be done. To take the excess screw plugs off, we usually just take a scratch piece of paper and put it here to protect the wood. And then with a dovetail saw, this little pull saw, cut through there, get as close as you can. See that getting pretty close to the bottom. And then I'll just take a real sharp chisel like this, and on a diagonal just kind of cut through it. Keep going until you can see some of the other wood coming off. And then I'll just hit it a little bit with light sandpaper, mostly just to rough it up to hold the paint. And that's it. So I'll go around and do the rest of these and clean them all up to make them flush like that. To ease over these edges here, there's a couple different ways you can do it. Here I have a spoke shave that is the rounded, not the straight, and sometimes that'll work okay. I'm at a kind of an awkward angle here trying to show you the camera. You can see how that works okay as you smooth it over like that. Another thing I've done is just use the chisel, but make sure that you have your bevel in the back, and Just bring it down, follow it around like that. That works pretty well. Sometimes the best thing is just a file. And I'll usually take it down so I have a 45-degree chamfer on there, and then split that, and then tip this to, like, 22.5 degrees. Kind of feather that out. And then when all is said and done here, we can use just a little bit of sandpaper. It smooths it out a little bit. I don't like it too smooth, but this also helps it to kind of rough it up and let the paint stick to it. So just a few options. For the top piece, I was going to use a glue-up piece, and my home center sells these, but not real happy with them. With the board, there's a lot of knots in here, and they'll work pretty well for the shelves, because the shelves will be inside, and these will be painted white. I'm a little bit concerned that some of the white paint might come through, or some of the knots might bleed through the white paint. And it just might not look as good for the top. So what I'm going to do is glue up the top out of 3 pieces of 3/4 inch select pine. This is all clear, no knots like the rest of the stuff I'm making. And I'll use my plate joiner, biscuit joiner, to put these together, and it just takes these little biscuits like this. I'm using a number 20, and I think I probably have about 10 of them running through the middle of these boards. So I've marked my spots about every 8 inches throughout the board, and mark the boards AA, BB, and we'll cut all the biscuit joints first. Okay, I've set up the boards, and what I did with my plate joiner is it has a really small hole that holds a bag to collect the dust. What I did was I just put a coupler on here to accept my vacuum attachment. That hole is really too small. It'll ruin your vacuum if you use it over time to suck everything through that tiny little hole. So this allows a lot of extra air to come through here. So put that on. There's just one screw on the bottom holding that on. And then I've already set my depth, and we will cut our first hole. We'll check the depth first. I think I want that just a little bit higher. Move the guide fence down just a little bit. And that's where the biscuit will go. Half in this side and half in the other side. We'll glue that in there. So I'll go through and make all the rest of these cuts and with the biscuit joiner, and then we'll get ready to glue these together. There's not a lot of magic to these glue ups. Just kind of make sure you have everything ready. I have all my bar clamps set up and my number 20 biscuits. And I'll just go through here and put a little bit of glue, not a lot, just a little ribbon of glue in each of these biscuit holes. Just enough so that when the biscuit goes in there, it grabs enough glue, pushes it up around it, and makes the biscuit inside there swell. Alright, and then I'll just put flat ribbon all the way down here. Don't want too much glue. The more that squeezes out, the more you waste, the more you have to clean up. Alright, so I'm starting with just 2 boards. And whatever you're comfortable with, you can do this with your finger. You can do this with a brush. For me, it's just a little bit faster to do it this way, with my finger. Cover that whole surface as evenly as you can. You have a decent amount of time with this. This is Titebond 2, and you have a decent amount of time, 5-10 minutes before it really starts to get tacky, and it's hard to move the boards around. Doesn't seem like a lot of time, but 5 minutes is a pretty long time when you're just sitting here working on something. Make sure you get on both sides of the biscuit joint here. Alright, we'll just take our 10 biscuits, push them in here. Try to make sure you center them. Alright, then we'll just carefully flip this board up and over onto that. I'll put it down like this, push them together, make sure they're lined up on the end here. Alright, so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to glue 2 boards at one time, clamp those, and get this as level as I possibly can. And it actually feels really good right there. But you might have to finesse it a little bit. Sometimes what I'll do is on the ends, if they're off a little bit, I'll put a C-clamp on there, and then it will clamp those together tightly. A lot of people put like sticks across here, and you can buy special clamps that are really expensive that flatten it on the top. They're never perfect, so you end up just finessing it anyway. So I'm going to do that, and we'll clamp these together, and I'll show you when it's all done. I'm on to adding my 3rd board here, and I have 3 clamps on the bottom and then 2 on the top. If you work with the black pipe for your clamps, you know that if the glue touches it, it'll put big black stains on there. So on the top, which this will be, I set it down, get my depth, and then just lift it up a little bit. You could put sticks under there if you want, but I just put just about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch gap on there. And don't over tighten these. You'll squeeze some of the glue out, but you don't want it all to squeeze out because you need some to hold the joint together. You'll be surprised if you put enough biscuits in here. These are about every 8 inches, 7-8 inches. You'll be surprised how flat these will stay. And you can always push down and pull up a little bit on it to get it to do what you want it to do. So we'll let this sit overnight and lock everything into place before we start to form this and smooth it out for the top. I always find it helpful that after the glue sets up for maybe 5-10 minutes after you glue these, it'll start to skin over just a little bit where it's no longer sticky, and then take a nice sharp putty knife and you can just scrape it right off, and that'll help your cleanup go a lot faster. So I'll do that after about 5-10 minutes, and then there's less I have to do with the scraper. Alright, so the top is all glued up. Finished taking my clamps off here. And then what I will do is, I may have to tighten this up a little bit. I will angle these toward me, and this should hold it in place. And then I'll take my cabinet scraper and make sure I have a good edge on it. And just a few passes, and that should clean up those edges. The biscuits that we used in here, along with the plate joiner, that really helped to keep the top nice and flat. Just keep this, your thumbs here, and bow it a little bit so you don't catch your corners, and that will dig in and push away from you. It'll take a little bit of time, but that should get all these little shavings. That should clean up your joints here. So this is what we're going to work on next, the top. If you have any areas that need a little more attention, I see I have one right here. I switched to rounded cabinet scraper, and that will allow me to just kind of reduce a smaller area here. So if you see a little bit of a lip there, what I'll do sometimes is just put some pencil lines across here, and then you can see your progress. You can see when the pencil lines disappear. A little bit left right here. And that feels a lot better. So sometimes you'll have your edges lift up a little bit, and then we'll just take them down gently like this. Depending on how you use your scraper, the angle at which you turn it away from you, you can scrape more or less. So you probably saw over here where there was really nothing to take off. I had it real flat like this, pushing it along. And that takes just a tiny, tiny little bit off like that. But if you lift it up, you'll catch more of that edge. And if you have your cabinet scraper dressed well enough for the edge, you'll even get little ribbons coming off of there and little swirls like you do when you have a plane. And that's looking pretty flat. You see where there's a little bit of glue in there? I'm just trying to remove that by holding it upright a little bit more. And that leaves more of the little ribbons on there. So just adjust it as you need to. This way will make it a little bit smoother and won't take quite as much off the farther up you go. If you have just maybe a 10 degree, which I guess if this was 0 and 90, this would be about maybe 80, 75. You're going to take a little bit more off. I have the end of my top board set up and ready to cut. I'm going to use my jigsaw again with the guide set up, and this will make a really nice clean cut with this super sharp blade here in the end piece. As you can see by the edge here, you see if I can get some light kind of reflecting up there. You can see how bright, or when it's brighter, you can see how clean that cuts the edge. So I won't sand that at all. I'll just round over the edge, or round over the corners, and that's ready for paint right now. For the cover, or the top, I want to round over the corners just a little bit. So I'm going to use a 1-inch radius, 1-inch diameter, I guess this would be. And I'll just put a little pencil line on here as my guide. And then I'm going to cut this off with my fine-tooth saw. Probably get one more cut out of here if I'm careful. Maybe not. Alright, then I will finish that up with a coarse file, not the rasp side, but a coarse file, and going on kind of a diagonal this way. And that should be good. So I'll do all four corners. Just put a slight radius on here. Remember I used a 1/2-inch radius or a 1-inch diameter circle. And then I will round over the tops, or the top edge, just a little bit. And what I'll do is, I guess I can show that right now. And what I'll do is what I usually do is just take this down with the block plane until there's about 3/16 or a 1/4 inch there, and then that's at 45, and then I'll take it up to about 22.5, a couple passes that way and a couple passes this way, and that rounds it over nicely. I'll show you that from the end too. This is what that looks like from the end, so it's rounded over. And I try not to make it too smooth because I know after I paint it with a couple of coats of paint, I'm going to come back and sand some of the edge off so it looks a little bit distressed. And I like when I catch a little bit of those uneven round over plane strokes, and it helps to make it look a little more distressed. So I'll do that all the way around the top, and then we'll be ready to mount the top on the carcass.